Good afternoon and welcome to today's event. My name is Tom Liebig. I'm the chairman of the ACG Programming Committee. Appreciate everybody joining us today. I'd especially like to thank our platinum sponsor, Benish, for sponsoring today's event. And with that, I will pass it over to Bob Ross to introduce our panel for this afternoon. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our ACG event that has a title too long for me to repeat. My name is Bob Ross, and I am a partner at Benish. I am chair of the firm's Global Transaction Group and vice chair of the firm's Private Equity Practice Group. I want to thank you so much for being here today. As a native Clevelander and a lifelong Browns fan, I am personally thrilled that Cleveland is hosting the 2021 NFL Draft. It is one of the things that my son and I have done for years together and always brings us wonderful moments in front of the TV and maybe, just maybe, this year live and in person. The economic impact that the draft will have on our city and the steps that the city has taken as a safety precaution related to the pandemic are cause for optimism and excitement. For those of you who don't know much about Benish, we are an Am Law 200 law firm with offices in Cleveland, Chicago, Columbus, Hackensack, Wilmington, Delaware, San Francisco, and Shanghai, all places where there are Browns backers clubs. These are exciting times at Benish. The firm has added over 100 attorneys in the past 5 years, and this is a growth rate in attorney count of over 70%. We have a long-standing involvement with ACG, and we are very active in the deal world, particularly private equity. So we're very proud of our involvement with ACG. At this point, I would like to welcome and introduce our speakers and our moderator. We will start, and I'm just reading, so if these are a little long, that's ACG's fault, not mine. We'll start with my good friend, David Gilbert. David serves as president and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, an organization dedicated to making Greater Cleveland the nation's foremost destination for large-scale sporting events, and Destination Cleveland, the region's convention and visitors bureau. David refounded the Sports Commission in 2000 and assumed his role with Destination Cleveland in 2011. He served as president and CEO of the 2016 host committee for the Republican National Convention. The Greater Cleveland Sports Commission serves to measurably improve the economy of the Greater Cleveland area and to enrich the community by attracting, creating, managing, and enhancing significant sporting and competitive events. Since 2000, the organization has attracted or created more than 215 events, providing nearly $850 million in economic activity to Northeast Ohio. At Destination Cleveland, David is responsible for carrying out the organization's mission to drive economic impact and stimulate community vitality by positioning and promoting Cleveland as an exciting and vibrant destination. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree from The Ohio State University and an MBA from Cleveland State, and his real claim to fame is that he grew up in Canton as best friends with my baby cousin, Jim. And we kind of hold that near and dear to the family. Next, we will have my new friend, Dino Bernacchi. As Senior Vice President of Marketing for the Cleveland Browns, Dino is responsible for building the brand, specifically through developing high-profile and successful integrated marketing campaigns that drive brand advocacy and profitability. Having a winning ball club certainly has helped his task. Prior to joining the Browns, he worked to build global brands for Mazda, Harley-Davidson, and General Motors, and prior to working for those firms, spent 8 years in different high-caliber advertising agencies, engaging in the brand strategies for multiple organizations. In a recent LinkedIn post, Dino said, "I am extremely proud of my team and this brand. It's what you do with opportunities to ensure one makes a lasting impact that matters most." He is a graduate of the University of Detroit Mercy and dual majors in marketing and business management. Lastly is our moderator for this afternoon, Gabriela Cruz, my new bachelor and bachelorette family member. Gabriella is a freelance sports reporter and host in the Cleveland area. She can be found dabbling in a number of gigs, from calling Cleveland Indians highlights and pumping up the crowd at Progressive Field to hosting featured segments on Fox Sports Ohio and Cleveland 19 News. Her work has been featured in Crane's Business Magazine as a member of 20 in their 20s issue, and she has graced the cover of Cleveland Magazine for Cleveland's Most Interesting People issue in 2019. She is a John Carroll University alum, where she established herself in the record books as a mid-distance track runner and NCAA Division III All-American cross-country runner. She later ran for Syracuse University while earning her master's degree in broadcast and digital journalism. So before I hand this over to Gabriella, I remind all of you that she is not the NFL commissioner, at least not yet. So please, no booing.
Bob, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Thanks for having me. We're going to kick this right off, and we'll start with David because, another little tidbit is I was an intern back in the day at the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission. So I have a very personal and inside look at what a big thinker and big visionary that you are and all that you've brought to Cleveland so far. So when we're talking about the NFL draft, give us a little background on what it took to bring the draft to Cleveland.
Well, thanks, Gabby. I'm one of our best interns ever.
I didn't pay him for
that. It's interesting, one, just what the draft has become. We a lot of what we do is keep an eye on events in a lot of different, in the NCAA world and the Olympic world and lots of others. And it's amazing in a relatively short time, about 7-8 years, the draft has gone from a televised show at Radio City Music Hall into one of the largest live sporting events in the country, and not even being a competition. And starting about 4 or 5 years ago, the NFL, about 7 years ago, they moved it outside of New York, held it in Chicago. Chicago added a festival to it and had it a couple of years and started moving around. And about 4 years ago, the NFL just started to get in the game of actually allowing cities to bid to host the draft. And the first big bid that they did started back in 2017. They were bidding out 3 different years, and they had 22 cities all in the running. And very long process, going through significant bid documents, and our first bid was actually done jointly with the Browns and the Football Hall of Fame. The Football Hall of Fame had already stepped forward, talked about how they wanted to host the draft, particularly in the 100th anniversary year of the NFL. And ultimately, through this iteration, we went from 22 cities down to 8. All 8 were asked to come to New York and present to a large group at the NFL. And that 8 was brought down to 5, and we were still in it. And it became pretty apparent that a draft wouldn't work in 2 cities. As much as it's wonderful to have the Football Hall of Fame as a partner, physically, it's such an enormous event. It really couldn't take place in both. And right around that time, the first 2 of the 3 years were awarded. 2019 to Nashville, 2020 to Las Vegas, 3 cities still left. And we really had gotten the sense that we were out of it. A couple of Dino's good friends and coworkers, a few of us said to the NFL events team and said, just give us a chance, give us 30 minutes to come to New York and present a new vision to you. Because we really had a sense that, and we had gotten on the side, no matter what you do, it's not going to work in both cities. You can't have a draft in one place one day, a whole setup another place. And we went to New York, and the 30-minute meeting turned into a 2-hour meeting. And we really painted a vision of what the draft could look like on our lakefront. And we really felt that that was such a special, unique place to Cleveland. And that meeting really helped us get back into the running. And then in just after the draft in Nashville, in May of 2019, we were awarded the draft for 21. So long process, great process, and in a lot of ways helped us sort of refine. But I'll tell you, one thing about these highly competitive. I mean, this was not just submitting stuff. We sent guitars to the commissioner with stickers of every NFL team on the outside and quotes from famous Clevelanders, all talking about the draft on the inside. And we went all out in the creativity to show them that we wanted it more than anybody else. And I think that really came through.
You worked it. That's really exciting to hear kind of the backstory on that. How do you think this compares to sort of the past events like the RNC and the NCAA regional games? How does this match up for you?
You know, in many ways, it is at least a non-COVID iteration. Would be the largest event Cleveland probably had ever hosted, maybe since the Great Lakes Exposition back in the 1930s. More visitors expected, probably twice the number of out-of-town visitors expected than the RNC. And the draft last year was watched by 55 million people around the country and around the world. So probably would rival the or be a little larger than the RNC in terms of its economic impact. But certainly overall, you would say it is, if not the largest, one of the largest events Cleveland would have ever hosted. And even where it's headed now with COVID, will still be one of the larger events that we will have ever hosted.
Yeah, we'll get to that, a little bit of like the COVID environment now. But Dino, really quick, why do you think, in your eyes at least, in the eyes of the NFL, why did they decide Cleveland?
First of all, I don't want to step over. David sold Ohio on the riverfront in April. I mean, that's a big lakefront. That's a big kudos to David to convince everybody this is the place. Candidly, it's the amazing work that group has already done. It's a large-scale events we've already hosted very successfully. The Sports Commission has already had a large number of events here and shown what they can do and the effort and energy they're going to put in. Alongside that, no one can debate the passion of our fans and debate the fact that this is the home of football. You know, the birth of football, the history of football is here. And if anybody can recognize that, it's the NFL. And so when it was made clear that the league would start moving the draft around, this always was a location that was on the map. But again, what that team did to really sell in what we would put forward is truly remarkable. And it's the reason that it's happening right now. And I'll say, I have to give our owners, Dee and Jimmy Haslam, lots of credit. They worked very tenaciously, you know, with the city, with David and with others to make sure that the NFL knew how important that this moment was going to be for Cleveland, and the fact that it really does put a huge spotlight on the city, and it's great economically for the city as well. So I think they too were pretty relentless in ensuring that the answer was going to be yes, and we're gifted with the draft here this year.
You know, I would want to add something and just really highlight something that Dino said. And I was remiss in talking about the Haslams. I think one of the things the NFL really saw was what an enormous team effort this was. And I think it's pretty fair to say that no matter what the work of the Sports Commission would have done, had it not been for the Haslams really working the highest ends at the NFL, we wouldn't have gotten it, and probably vice versa. I think you know, that kind of lobbying at the highest levels doesn't work in any community if you can't show the rest of the NFL team that we know how to pull it off. So it was a fantastic partnership from day one.
Yeah, and you guys have such the track record. I know this is building a lot of excitement for our city. From an economic standpoint, you know, what were the initial projections before COVID-19, and how do those change, or have they changed today?
Well, the economic impact, which is what that really measures, is the way we calculate it is direct spending by dollars spent in our market from outside of our market, largely from visitors, but also money the NFL would spend on production and those kinds of things. Doesn't even include the media impact. And the economic impact that Nashville saw was somewhere north of $120 million. I mean, an incredible amount of money, I think, for a 3-day event. While there is setup and tear down, largely is a 3-day event. To pump $120 million into your community is just off the charts. And again, that doesn't even include, like I said, the eyeballs of the world watching and what the NFL does to promote a city. It's hard to say, Gabby, what that will be now. We know it's certainly going to be less visitors. And you had in Nashville, all 3 days of the draft, they estimated overall just over 100,000 visitors from out of market coming into Nashville. It's a lot of people spending a lot of time, a lot of money. It's not going to be that in Cleveland, but I think it's fair to say it's certainly going to be tens of thousands. And a lot of the final numbers are being worked out, and we don't know exactly the number of out of town versus local and so on, but it's still going to be incredibly impactful. And in many ways, just as or more impactful as otherwise would be, given how starved the businesses are, the hotels, the restaurants, the retail, especially downtown in this COVID year, and how, quite frankly, for a lot of these businesses, they've stayed open waiting for this time, or this will be those few days that will carry them over to stay in business through when we're finally out of COVID. So whatever that number ultimately is, it is going to be incredibly impactful for our community.
And you mentioned less visitors, but are there any new areas of positive economic impact given the COVID environment?
I think that what I would say is maybe longer term, and that is, the interesting thing about COVID, and certainly in our industry of travel, tourism, major events, largely shut down for a year. And other than little pockets, the Browns probably being the biggest one during the season of successfully having those 12,000 fans a game. I think that this was everywhere across the country, a level setting event. I think that this event, being one of the very few large national events, in-person events in the country coming out of COVID, will really, it's coming at an interesting time that I think it will help propel us faster out of COVID than a lot of our peer cities. And I think that's going to have a really interesting longer term effect. People are going to see that it is safe to travel to Cleveland, that Cleveland already is having visitors and doing it well. And I think that it's going to be exciting to see what happens just on the other side of the draft.
And Dino, with all this excitement and hosting the NFL draft in Cleveland, how does this directly or even indirectly help the organization and the Browns and all of our fans?
Yeah, really, it's about Clevelanders, and what's going to benefit the city actually will benefit the Browns as well. And that's just part of being an important part of the community, and candidly a centerpiece when you think about downtown. But the NFL has actually shown, since they put this on the road, I think it was around 2015, they do research in every distinct area, and they ask questions of NFL fans who participated with the event or who were watching the event. Do you believe that this had an impact, a perception impact on the NFL and on the hosting city and team? And the answer unequivocally was yes. And the biggest benefactor, candidly, was the team that was representing of that city. Same when it came to increased interests in the NFL. I think everyone in the United States shows with the ratings on television that there's huge interest, but think of all fans of all ages, specifically the younger generation. This is that one moment that they really do tune into. And then when you even talk about, interest on the upcoming season, it is the starting point for that next season of intense excitement. And it really does increase and amplify if you are the host city for the team itself. And then finally, the impact that it has on the local community. I mean, I think it was 98% of club fans knew what a great impact that it had on the city. So, and we get to be a part of it. And frankly, we get to do a spotlight on the city itself, but we also get to do a spotlight on the Cleveland Browns. And there's so many things off the football field that this organization, that our football players do to give back to the community that we wouldn't necessarily be able to showcase without this massive stage. David already talked about that. It's a massive spotlight stage that we all get to stand on. And it's something that, frankly, proudly, we can talk about all the good that it does and all the good that Clevelanders and the Browns are doing in and around this.
And it's a good time for the team. The team is just great.
Hey, look, I didn't want to bring it up. It doesn't hurt that we're at the back end of round one this year. That's actually a really nice place to be.
It's great timing. David, let's talk a little bit of the logistics here. Coming out of the pandemic slowly here, what are some of the safety protocols that are going to be happening for this big event?
Well, so much time and energy has been put into that, and led by the NFL, who successfully put on a whole season and postseason. The NFL is working directly with the CDC, with the state health department, city Department of Health, and there's really two primary pieces of the draft. One is what's called the NFL experience, and it's a basically, a large fan fest. It's sort of an NFL playground. And we're lucky that ours, because of our site, we have a huge outdoor site encompassing not only the field of First Energy Stadium, but all the area north and west, then encompassing most of North Coast Harbor in and around Great Lakes Science Center, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, about 500,000 square feet of space. So that is going to have, by the way, everything in the draft is free, which is really cool. It's why it's become this pilgrimage for NFL fans around the country. And the Fan Fest or the NFL experience will be time ticketing. So people will be able to log on, get their free ticket for a particular time on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But what it's going to allow to do, because it's such a large footprint, is have a lot of people but space. And in that area, it will be masks required on the whole time unless people are eating, and there'll be designated eating and drinking areas for that. Lots of people monitoring masks, directional signs, the kind of things that we've seen in the heart of COVID, hand sanitizing stations everywhere. And then there are going to be some areas. The second piece is everything in and around the draft stage. And that's where the picks are. That's where the concerts are each night. There's going to be other things, fireworks going on, so people can watch great stuff from all over the community. While the details haven't been finalized, there's going to be a lot of those areas where first you'll have to have proven that you're vaccinated. And those are going to be smaller in number because they're fixed seating. Just like you had fixed seating for Browns games, or those types of things are smaller numbers of people when it's not people being moving around. So, but all of those details are going to be out in the next week or so for fans locally and throughout the country.
Yeah, you hit a bunch of things there. So there's going to be concerts. Is there anything else event-wise that people can look forward to? You mentioned kind of a big fan fest. I'm likening it to maybe the MLB All-Star. That's the only concept I have, or maybe some other folks listening have, of how that kind of went down.
Yeah, it's, a great comparison is for MLB All-Star Game. They have their fan fest in Convention Center, and it's the NFL experience, very similar. That it's all kinds of interactive things to do, to see, to immerse you in that NFL experience. Some other things that are being planned is really how our entire downtown activates for the draft. So the types of signs, in fact, some things are starting to even go up tomorrow. And you're going to start seeing downtown transform into NFL Central. And so That's all kinds of signage that's around. You're going to see some really cool stuff. Life-size helmets that are going to be installed coming up on Mall C. While it's not final, because a lot of things still have to pass through the city and make sure all the health protocols, but we're looking at two really interesting big outdoor dining and viewing areas throughout downtown. So if you go, because again, we know you can't cram 100,000 people elbow to elbow in one place because of COVID, but you can come down, go be part of that NFL experience. And if your time is up, you can go to another great place downtown, get some carry out, sit in a big open area, listen to music, watch stuff on a screen, and hang around and watch fireworks. So it really, we want to make that entire downtown a fantastic experience.
We're getting excited about it. Dino, we can't help. I'm sure people want to ask questions about the Browns now too. And I know you can't tell us any secrets or anything like that, but how do you feel about the front office moves so far this season? Just, to bring us that Browns excitement.
Yeah, I know you're going to expect me to cheerlead, but it's really, really easy to do right now. I think if you were to listen to, whether it's 850 or 92.3 The Fan Sports Talk Radio, I actually enjoy it. And they're giving a lot of credit, to that front office. AB, Andrew Berry has been, he's really one of the smartest individuals that I have personally ever met from a business standpoint, let alone the astuteness that he has when it comes to football, and really finding not just the right person, but the right person, the right fit for this organization. And culture fit is a really, really big thing. So Paul DePodesta, AB, and coach, Stefanski Coach of the Year, they really have already started to shore up some things that, a lot of individuals on the outside said we needed to this past season. 6 moves already in free agency around defense. And you could say one of the best free safeties, that's out there with John Johnson III, from Hill to Walker to McKinley to Smith and now Jackson. There's depth that is now being added into that. I think one of the most exciting things when you think of offseason, and I'm sure Browns fans will appreciate this, and this is words that came from Coach: we are not a team in transition. And I think that's a wonderful quote to use. And their focus is really clear. They really do want smart, tough, accountable, resilient individuals. And they're not resting on the laurels of what happened this past year. Matter of fact, if you were to go to our site or a YouTube page, there's 2 recent interviews that were done by Coach and AB. And Coach said, we have to get better. We have to improve. We have to evolve, and to take absolutely nothing for granted. And he said, we're ready for whatever is thrown at us. If COVID sticks around and we got to do Zoom, he's 100% ready for it and has a game plan put in place. And the fact that he does in this front office, really has grounded what the culture of Cleveland Browns football has always been, but they really reflected today with, we're not done and we want more. That tenacity, that determination, really, as he'll say, hard work and effort. Right here in Berea on the backside, we had a huge banner put up at the beginning of training camp that Coach wanted. It says team. And he is all about making sure that this team is focused. And so as you kind of look to the draft, so many people have asked me, even family, look, you're not till like 26. What are you going to do? Who is it going to be? I really wish they would share just a little bit with me. They don't, but I will say, trusting in what they've done this past year, the acquisitions of Conklin and Hooper were significant. The draft picks, when you go back to Wills, Bryant, and DPJ, that's really pretty incredible when you see the production of those young men in year 1, let alone Wills, who switched from right to left. I don't know what they're going to do, I just know that they have their pulse on what this football team needs and are putting the right pieces in place to get it. And then as you think about the defense, you know, if you look at the video that Grant Delpit has and Greedy Williams are preparing for, you know, a big year for them to make a statement for this team, there's so much literally to be optimistic about. Coach doesn't allow hype. He puts everyone in check. It's one game at a time. So he always talks about 1-0. But there is a lot to truly believe in what this front office and organization is doing.
Thank you, guys. I think that's a great point to end on, and I think this is a perfect time to open the floor for some Q&A here. And if you just direct your message to Julia, she'll funnel it over to me. But it looks like we already have one for David. And this is just going back to the planning of the whole event. How thick is your planning binder for the NFL draft, and how much does it weigh?
It's, I'll tell you what's been interesting. You know, one, it's the NFL's event, so they have an unbelievable team. But of course, our responsibility locally is to provide our community as a palette for what they need. And on top of it, we've added a whole layer of, you know, not only everything that we have to do to make sure our community can, you know, it's almost like Lego blocks. You know, we have to provide, you know, the undercarriage that fits into what the NFL wants to do in a city. And if it doesn't fit, the event doesn't work well. And then we've also added locally a whole series of really cool programming focused on highlighting diversity and equity through sports, and to really enhance what we're doing in the community. I will add, Gabby, one other thing is that what's pretty cool for Cleveland is we're in the midst of this incredible run of hosting some of the largest events that we possibly could host, all in a 5.5 year period of time. We have MLB All-Star Game, NFL Draft, NBA All-Star Game, which is now only 10.5 months away. And then in 2024, the NCAA Women's Final Four. So it's pretty exciting that we have this ball rolling, and we are, you know, this you know, a city that year in and year out is hosting, you know, arguably some of the very single biggest events in the country.
Gabby, his virtual binder was very large. I thought there's probably 4 or 5 or 10 different alternative plans that we've been going through the past 60 days.
I can't imagine. You know, it's a good question because there, like you alluded to earlier, I think, David, the teamwork aspect, or Dino, I mean, to think of the amount of people and planning and hands that have to go into this, and even just to push it for us to get this far, or to get this, is so exciting. And I know it's going to be a huge payoff, and our fans are so excited. I know the people listening are excited. And if anyone else has another question, I'll be checking them over here in the chat. I see another one that came in. All right, David, as you stated, actually, John, I should ask John, do you want to ask your question? Grabner, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hey, David, how are you? Before I ask, I do want to show off my 1964 autographed football from the Cleveland Browns, standing in their locker room when I was 12 years old. So that's got to have some value along. Maybe I'll show it off for the NFL draft. But you stated that this won't be like Nashville due to COVID, which we totally understand. But I'm curious, in terms of goals that you have and dollars and attendance, have you set some targets that you would like to achieve? So if the thing is all said and done, you said, boom, we hit the numbers we wanted to hit.
You know, I'd say no. The reason is you know, COVID has put everything in flux. You know, we had a goal when we were awarded, and that was really pegging $100 million. You know, John, it's really hard to say. It's hard. It's, you know, it will certainly be in the tens of millions, that's for sure, which is significant. But, you know, I will tell you what we've really chosen, and we've talked a lot about this internally, what we've chosen is to look at what we're getting and not what we're not getting. And, you know, it's easy to say, oh, it could have looked like it did in Nashville. But that's, you know, that's not the reality. But the fact is, what we are getting is an event that right now any city in the country would kill to have right now, especially coming out of COVID when every major city in the country is starved and so many of the businesses in this industry have failed or are hanging on by a thread. So we will do a full economic impact study shortly after the draft. It's something we do after large events, so we will publicly have a number. But right now, really, it's really tough to say because final numbers haven't been or numbers have not been finalized, nor do we have a sense of in-towners or out-of-towners, which we would have had the historical figures in past years would have led us to have a better understanding. It's hard to say right now. The one last thing I'll say is the good news is you take away the fans, the draft, thanks to the NFL, is going to look just like it would have looked. Yeah. The setup for Cleveland, the stage, the media, it's all of that is going to be unbelievable. And for those who are here, for those locally out of town that experience it or watch it, it's going to be an incredible experience.
Yeah, and I'll add in, John, David came to a Cleveland Browns meeting and we were at the stadium and somebody asked that same exact question. And David, you said something that really stuck with me that will have a very, very, I think, positive impact for the future economic growth of being able to do things like this. We would have been on a stage, one of the biggest stages of the year anyway, having it here in Cleveland like we are. However, one of the things, David, I remember saying that is we're having it when no one else is doing something like this. And imagine post this, when we do it successfully, as all eyes are watching, how are they going to do it? It's going to draw greater confidence and interest from others. Say, if they can do that under those conditions and make it that way with as successfully as they've done it, it's going to actually potentially lure in more opportunity for Cleveland. So on the front end, I remember, David, you said it may not be the dollars that originally anticipated, but that wasn't going to happen anyway. But on the back end, it's really going to show what, in Clevelanders really can do and pull off. And I think that's the exciting part. We're going to do this great. I have no doubt about it, especially with David and his team. And I would expect, knock on wood, that it'll come back sooner than later. No pressure, David.
Thank you, guys. Good answers. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We're going to let Charlie Hatch, go ahead. You can ask your question.
All right. Hello. Thank you for having this. I was just curious, what have the internal communications challenges been like? You mentioned this kind of like what Kevin Stefanski's gone through, hosting meetings, but trying to put together an NFL draft when you're doing it kind of like this virtually.
Charlie, you talking about really in planning the event?
And planning the event during the pandemic, not only for the health and safety challenges, but also speaking to just your end of it and the internal communication and trying to push this along.
What's one thing that's kind of interesting, and I think this is true for all of us, I think we've all, as the years gone on, we've actually really gotten used to how these types of virtual meetings work, Zoom, Teams, so on. And this is such a big team effort. So we have locally the Browns and the Sports Commission, Destination Cleveland, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, and the City of Cleveland and others, and a lot of committees that all kinds of other folks. And then we all have our counterparts with the NFL, and there's, we have meetings with 50, 60, 80 people on there, and from all over the place. I actually feel like I hadn't thought about, Charlie, it's a great question. I don't think it's held us back at all. And maybe in part because, the last 6 months when things here have gotten, really, really picked up, I think by that time, most of us had gotten used to how we do business, with other people virtually. And thankfully, I don't think it's held us back at all.
No, I'd agree with you, David. I think there would have been committees put together anyways. And candidly, a lot of individuals in those committees, if you think about it, are out of towners when you think of the NFL. They don't reside here. And I mean, I hate to say this, but before COVID, I don't know about you. I was not very astute at doing things like we're doing today and being very successful at retaining a video conference for any longer than probably 2 or 3 minutes. At least my daughters would tell you I would struggle with that. However, to David's point, we all really have mastered it. And I know this will sound crazy. It's easier almost when you're in a distance like that to share information this way. And we've all had to perfect it, the presentation of information. And I would say, good or bad, it's actually probably forced us to heighten our communication because everything was still unstable. We didn't know what was going to happen. And when David and team, along with the NFL, organized very specific committees, I think, David, I can't remember, 10, 11, 12, 13 different committees to come together with frequency, and each one of us holding each other accountable to what the agenda was, to what the topics were, to what the outcomes were going to be. At the beginning, you're like, how are we going to pull this off? And that was a year ago to, I mean, swear to God, 60 days ago, we probably had probably 7 to 10 different alternative plans, but it didn't feel, I don't know, it just didn't feel overly complicated. We were ready. And it's because we could quickly aggregate together in a moment's notice through something like Teams or Zoom that frankly allowed us to be able to do it and pull it off in a way that's going to make this city look great. And that just sitting from my chair, that's what I saw. But it's a great question.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more. Okay, another anonymous question. We've had Major League, LeBron, Drew Carey, and now the Browns. Do our speakers think that Cleveland is the U.S.'s best kept secret? And do they think it will change?
We will not be a secret, specifically when it comes to the draft and when we finally bring it home with the big trophy here in Cleveland. Yes, I think that we are the best kept secret. And I'm sorry to jump in first, David, but you heard from my resume coming from out of town, and I always lived close to Cleveland, had visited, but you don't know until you're here. And frankly, why I have viewed this so important is this is our community in our town, and we get to showcase it. And I think David can attest with all the different things we're doing with the NFL Network and the content being produced. We want to make sure that we maximize and leverage this stage so people want to visit here and eventually want to come and stay here. I do believe, we're on a positive path as we move forward. And this is only one of many stages that are going to be coming. And again, David and his team have been working unbelievable efforts in and around bringing more programs here. And our Browns are ready to take on that next big challenge. And I hope you believe that in your hearts, and Stefanski has that game plan. And so I think there's even greater things still to come. Go Browns.
The one thing I'd add, because it's hard, I'm not trying to top, it's hard to top because Dino is dead on with everything. A lot of us have learned, they say it's hard to get people to come to Cleveland, it's harder to get them to leave. And I think that's what's great about, you hear that from employers, that's what's great about an event like this. We're gonna have so many people coming here, seeing what we Clevelanders see, and that's great for our future.
Okay, we've got our musical question. Speaking of music, you might be able to hear the music behind me. I'm actually at Progressive Field now because we are preparing for the home opener coming up. So we gotta, if you can hear the sound system, that's why. But we do have a question from Ed, if you wanted to ask it, about the music.
Sure. Yes, I wanted to know if there's any information that's available yet about the bands that are going to be playing at the different stages, and what the mix is going to be with national acts versus local bands, and especially in the interest of, with the pandemic, musicians have not been given the opportunity to generate revenue to support their families, particularly local musicians that don't have the stature of national acts. And I just wondered, how did you go about putting together the lineup, if you will, and inviting musical acts, and what consideration is given to allowing local musicians a chance to get that stage and that audience?
Great question. a couple of things to note is that you know, the NFL does a fantastic job of integrating the essence of the community they're in with the draft, and in every way, in the graphics, and in this case, if you saw Nashville's draft, a lot of us paid attention because, you know, shortly after we were awarded, all about country music. And here we're very fortunate, being the home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is down the draft footprint. It's music is that much more important. It's looking like probably in around 2 weeks they're going to announce all the musical acts, because, you know, the tough part is with COVID, a lot of things that would have been lined up months and months ago, they really didn't know for sure if they could do. I mean, think if you asked an out-of-town artist to come to a city 4 or 5 months ago, they would have said you were crazy. You know, we're traveling, it wasn't safe. Or so what I would say is look for announcements, and it is going to be, I think, a great lineup. There's also going to be local musicians, you know, and certainly thinking of ties to Cleveland is very important. Not just local musicians, but musicians with ties to Cleveland, you know, is all very important, and will certainly play a really exciting role in the draft.
All right, I don't see any more questions funneling in here. So I think, you know, I think this is a great place to thank everybody for your time, especially David and Dino, and our sponsor, Benish. So thank you for putting this on and letting folks listen in and ask their questions. And we're really excited. Go Browns.
Go Browns.
Go Browns.